Thanks, Ian, for that introduction and to the world of big data. I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective and talk a bit. The title of my talk is Beyond Article Stewardship. So I'm aiming my talk at those of us who publish journals, who work with researchers, engineers, et cetera, who typically in the past have, our relationship with them is they send us articles, we publish them, we steward them, we add them to our databases, we sell them by subscription to libraries and corporate entities. So you might ask yourself, what does he mean by big data? And I really don't mean those traditional things. Remember those things that we called supplementary material, where an author, if he exceeded the page budget, he would, and they say, well, I've got 50 other pictures that I'd like to be part of my article, and we would accept those, and we put them up on we put a link to them from our digital library for people to download. I'm talking about really big data, like terabytes of data. As an example, I'm working now on a project with some folks at a major telecom company that have wireless signal propagation data, right? So they're studying the paths of wireless signals through cities and whatnot, and doing lots of research on that. It'd be great, or what they'd like to do is make that data more open and share that with the research community. Some people at Johns Hopkins University are working on this great thing called the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. It's a major project funded by the National Science Foundation. There's 230 million celestial objects. It's like, right now it's about 500 terabytes. They're still in the process of capturing all of these photographs. But again, the idea behind that is to collect all that data and make it shareable. But I'm sure that tomorrow, if you went back to your office and called any of your authors up, they'd probably say, yeah, I've got a friend who's at so-and-so university, and he's got this really big database, been growing it for years. It's XYZ kind of data, and he doesn't know how to preserve it. He doesn't know what's going to happen to it, but it'd be a shame to lose years and years of work. So that's where I think we can, as publishers, step in and begin to play a role. Indeed, the federal government in the United States feels the same way. Just this past February 22, the U.S. Office of Science and Technology Policy put out a directive on research data. They also put the directive out on making all articles that have been funded by the federal government open access. But they also said in the same directive, if a researcher gets money from these agencies that have budgets of over $100 million, and that researcher uses data in that research, that data must be, you must have a plan to preserve that data, and you must have a plan to make that data accessible. So what do I hear when I read that? What did I hear? I heard opportunity, I think, for the publishers, right? I think there's an opportunity somewhere for institutional libraries as well, but I think we need to begin this dialogue of creating a community like together. How do we solve this problem? How do we meet the directive of the OSTP, and how do we make this data more shareable? So just a brief graphic. I mean, I think the things that we want to do, we want to take data that are unmanaged and manage them, right? Big data set at AT&T Bell, the old AT&T Bell Labs that may die away. That's unmanaged data. I'd like to be able to go in there, take that over, and manage it. It's disconnected. I'd like to connect that to articles that cite it or articles that use that data. I'd like to make it findable, so I'd like to create citation records for it. And I'd like to make that data reusable and let the rest of the world do with it and make further discoveries with it. I think to get back to something that Tim O'Reilly said last night about closing the loop, let's close the loop on this data. There are a lot of open loops out there in the labs of the people that send you articles every single day of the week. So indeed, I actually have the pleasure of being the current chair of the STM's Future Lab. And it's an interesting group of people. A few of you are in the room today. David, the two Davids up front here, and Howard in the back. And maybe I might have missed a couple of others, but we meet virtually through the year, but also in person in December, and we try to outline trends that are driving the business, right? And one trend that was, first of all, the process that we use is we go around the room, right around the table, and everyone labels out their 3 big issues, and then we try to whittle them down and see some commonalities and overlap. And overwhelmingly, last December, one of the big issues was data. Data is a big issue, and there's an opportunity. And this Futures Lab Committee does represent all of the major STM publishers in the world. So what did we say in December? We said that for the second year in a row now, because we also said the same thing in December of 2011, it's all about data validation. Okay, so I've got this database of antenna propagation data. Is it true? What was the collection process that leads me to believe that this data is all accurate? We need to create citation practices. Those are beginning to take hold, and they're in place, but I think we have to create bidirectional linking between articles that cite that data, and also when we have that data in a repository, show all of the articles that are related. So make those links bidirectional. And then the tough one, right? And finding the money and the resources to preserve and create access routes to that data. So storage, data transformation, will those be issues in the future, right? If you claim to steward something and curate something, you take on a responsibility to ensure the accessibility of that through the years. So are there any data transformation issues that we need to deal with? I think user interfaces are an important issue, right? So if I have this big data set, generally in the lab, there are different ways that people, different interfaces that they create to get to the data. Some are, just, command line commands that they use to pull data out. And I've seen other examples of data sets where there's a great web interface, and the researchers have built some APIs for other researchers in their lab to access that data. So again, creating a user interface to this stuff, creating APIs to the data, those are issues that I think we can help work with our researchers on to provide those 2 things. So I'll talk now about linking, then I'll talk about more in depth about preservation, and then some things that we can do as publishers to provide services to our authors to try to make this stuff a reality. So, a great data repository in the world right now is housed at the Australian National University Data Center in Brisbane, I believe. And it's a great, you can go search it, you can find all sorts of esoteric data, but one thing you really can't find, are there related journal articles to it. So I think there's an opportunity here to, do that. Here's just a slice of a metadata site called DataCite that if researchers have a data set, they can actually submit a metadata record to DataCite and have people go to this and actually find a link to that data. But again, we don't see any indication here that I think we can take another step here and have a list of that undoubtedly are journal articles that are related to this. It'd be really cool to have all of those journal articles to give this data some context, right? If you link it to journal articles, it makes that data a little more, useful. Now, DataCite only lists the metadata, and they'll list a DOI that will bring you then out to any number of data repositories that house this particular data. So the user going from here now will be taken off to any number of different interfaces. And there's really no standardization once they get there. So they may be taken off to the to a data center at UCal Irvine, Harvard, MIT. DataCite really only is a metadata repository. It's not actually a place where people store the data. It's also a great service for users of, creators of big data to register DOI, so they are a DOI registration agency as well. By the way, you also can register DOIs for big data sets through Crossref if you so choose to do that. DRYAD, I think, represents a great great opportunity for us to get involved. If you're not members of DRYAD, if you don't follow what DRYAD is doing, I urge you to. I've got some links at the end of my presentation. I urge you to go to the DRYAD site and learn more about it, and perhaps become a member at DRYAD. So DRYAD is a repository, right? So it's a young repository. Its genesis was from a National Science Foundation grant, and there's a board of directors. It reminds me in some ways of, when I look at the events surrounding DRYAD, think back to the early days of Crossref, right, and how Crossref saw a need for a service and publishers put together a board and created this service. Well, DRYAD, I think, is in its early days, and it needs your support, and I urge you all to find out more about it. There is a membership model. Now, DRYAD is basically you get to the DRYAD site, and it tells you right up front that that data is all open, right? It's not paid, it will not be behind a paywall. So the money has to come from somewhere to sustain this data, and the DRYAD board proposes that somewhere is publishers. So provide that as a service to your authors. Join DRYAD as a member, and as you add data sets, you pay a fee to ensure the longevity of that data. It's a searchable database. You'll search through it, and this is one example. This is sort of a neat example, actually. It's not a very big set of data, but it's a data related to an article at the American Naturalist, and you'll see right down here there's actually a link to the data. It's just a big Excel spreadsheet, not a very substantial piece of data, but nevertheless, we see a metadata record, we see a link to the data is open, and we see links via DOI back to the American Naturalist, where you can read the article that explains what this data is about. It's a great idea. The next thing I think that excites me is that different companies are beginning to develop, not only companies but other institutions are developing services to their authors to help them devise data management plans. So where can an author go who has big data and is trying to comply with the OSTP directive? Elsevier just began the Elsevier Research Data Service. And Johns Hopkins University, I think, is also another great standard bearer in this area through an organization they developed called the dataconservancy.org. I'll say more about both of these as we go along. JHU is doing some great stuff in that it's not only a service to the JHU authors, but they're also trying to reach out to publishers like us to dialogue with them, to share with them our problems, and they share with us their solutions. It's a group of really bright people that we can learn a lot from. And again, that's funded by the NSF, the JHU effort. Elsevier, this is a screen grab from Elsevier's Research Data Services. Again, it's a service, it's a new group within Elsevier. Anyone from Elsevier here that might make me behave as I talk about this? No? Okay. Well, as I understand it, it's a relatively new service, and as you can read, it claims to work with authors to make some sense out of their big data. But it says a lot to us, right? That one of the world's biggest STM publishers sees this as an important enough problem that they've developed now a group internally to begin to deal with this and to reach out with their authors and begin to build some best practices around metadata collection, around storage, and access. Data Conservancy, this is the top web page from the Data Conservancy group. And again, it's a group of about 6 or 7 people at the Sheridan Libraries at Johns Hopkins University. They have software, actually, so if you want to build your own repository, they have software there that you can use to load that data into a repository, provide access to it, provide mechanisms to share it, and provide mechanisms to send your citations directly out to DataCite, et cetera. Great group of people again. They were featured in there was a great article in Nature, Howard helped me, back in February on big data, I believe. Yeah, Mark Ware here from Outcell is nodding his head yes. And the JHU Data Conservancy group was actually featured in that article. Might have been the February issue of Nature. But again, I think these people are breaking some fresh ground and some new ground, and they're pioneering in some sense, solutions to the problems that we face, and are open to hearing from publishers. I reached out to them at the IEEE, and we went down there, and we have a project going that we can't yet talk about, but it shows some promise. And they're the kind of people that when you look at this problem, you feel sort of overwhelmed, right? We don't have any data scientists within our company yet. And as faced with the problem, we say, okay, it's great to have some friendly, helpful guidance along the way as we try to solve the problem. So I urge you all to reach out. Don't all call them tomorrow morning, but I'm sure if you contacted them, they'd be happy to invite you to Baltimore and tell you their story and invite you to perhaps explore some opportunity with them. This is new, and Howard, you might help me with this. Nature.com just announced actually, I guess a journal, or it's a website journal devoted to research data, launching in 2014, according to the press release. And that will, it's again, not a data repository, but I believe it's a journal about data. So it's okay. Yeah, so I use the word journal synonymously with website these days. So yeah, it is a place to go to I guess, publish reports about data. So again, another major company, launching a web publication around data. So is data becoming important? Yeah. So Elsevier has a big initiative. Nature's launched an initiative. We're seeing initiatives at JHU. We've got the National Science Foundation saying it's a big issue. So, answer the question. If you're not involved in this, you really need to take some steps to engage yourself in it. And what can you do? I would get engaged with dialogue on several levels. Size the problem within your sphere of publishing, right? Speak to your authors and your editors. If you have a chance to talk to the editor of a journal, just ask, hey, I know you deal with articles, but can you point us to any experiments that we might do on a data set? Can you point to a data set out there? And they're all over the place. It doesn't matter what science you're publishing in, life sciences, engineering, humanities. The data is all around us, and I'd be surprised if you didn't find, after a couple of conversations with editors, some opportunities to go out there and become almost a savior of this data. I think it's quite exciting, and I think very likely that you'd catch a fish if you put that hook out there. Journal editors as well, peers in the publishing business. So I think we should all begin to talk to each other about this new opportunity. Talk to your IT resources. What's happening in the worlds of cloud computing. Databases like Hadoop. There's a great conference. If you talk to your IT people, there's a great Hadoop conference. Hadoop is just gigantic, a database that handles big unstructured data, like really big unstructured data. And you can actually put a layer of services on top of it from, say, MarkLogic. MarkLogic integrators partner with Hadoop to provide interfaces to data that's held by Hadoop. Hadoop has there's a big Hadoop conference in New York in, I believe, at the end of October. Encourage you all to urge your IT people to get involved with the big data movement. You monitor certainly the policy and technical developments through the OSTP. This whole data thing has been lurking for about 5 years. I can remember coming to an SSP meeting probably about 5 years ago with Cliff Lynch. He warned us. He said, the NSF is going to decree in a few years that we need to start dealing with big data, that authors begin to, that researchers begin to curate their big data, and suddenly it's becoming true. And lastly, I would say develop a data management team as part of your publishing operations. I think data is playing a big role in all of the publishing companies. I mean, the aspects that Ian has mentioned in analyzing your own internal data for marketing purposes is one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is what I've just talked to you about. And I think hiring some new kind of talent into your company, this new job called the data scientist, which somebody, a visionary said this, sort of, that's the cook of the future. I mean, that's an exploding field in information science schools, computer science departments are turning out people that are, expert in this stuff. And it's the kind of expertise that we don't have within our companies right now, at least not within mine. And we certainly have a lot of IT expertise, but certainly not on the level of like the big data scientists. And I think that we all need to, if we're serious about this mission that we're on of serving the science community and preserving research and sharing research, I think it's incumbent upon us to reach out and find the proper people to help us do it. So I hope I didn't go too fast. I tend to talk too fast, but sorry about that. For further research, I think these slides will be available, but I'll keep this slide up for a little bit. Look what's happening at DataSite. Go right to the sources. The International STM Association has a research data group that meets a couple of times a year that addresses these issues. I have a link here to the Data Conservancy group at JHU. A link to DRYAD. Become a member of DRYAD. If you don't do anything else over the summer, join DRYAD. A link to the Australian National Data Service, which I think is a pretty unique, government-backed data service. And take a look at the Elsevier Research Data Services website, because it explains in more detail than I gave you here today, what that service is. And I think we can develop, as Elsevier, I envision having a services unit, maybe a two-person unit within the IEEE that works with the editorial department and say, hey, can we go out and identify, some data sets and begin to work and develop a plan for those particular, to preserve that particular set of information. Right now, some of us do that as part of our day job, but it would be really neat to develop a new group within, within our company. So I think there's some opportunity there for you to suggest to your HR departments to begin to look for new kind of talent and develop a little subgroup within your IT departments. And that pretty much concludes my talk. And Paula, thank you for inviting me, and sorry if I rambled a little bit, which I tend to do, but I hope I've given you at least a high-level view of, again, identifying the data that we need to steward, how to build citations to it, and how to secure it and preserve it for the future. Lastly, I'll end with one point. I think this will be costly, and it's sort of the thing that I'm not sure that we can all make money off of if the data is going to be open. So I think that any efforts that we do, I feel that personally I'm in a great position. I work for a very prominent society or set of societies. and we have that as our mission to preserve this sort of material. But I think if you're a commercial publishing company, it's reach out to corporations, reach out to government. I think there's quite a bit of government money out there to begin to build some data repositories. So work with the NSF, the National Academies of Science, and on the other side, on the life sciences side, the NIH, to try to work with them to see how much grant money is out there to get some of this stuff started. Thank you very much, Paula. And now I'll turn it over to Mackenzie Smith.